The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Let me introduce our panel today, the Majority Leader, Kirk Cox.
Woody, always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Chairman of County, Cities, and Towns, my friend, Mr. Ingram. How are you doing, Riley?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
And from the State Senate, Sen.Martin, who chairs Education and Health.
Woody, thank you for having us. I always enjoy it.
Very fast 45-day session here. I know you've had a lot of action on education and health. How is it going?
Well, we've got 3 fewer weeks in the short session than we have in the long session. So that means we have 3 fewer regularly scheduled meetings. But yet, I've had, I think, as many, if not probably more, bills than ever assigned to my committee in a long session. Introduced in the Senate, there were 139 bills assigned to the Senate Education and Health Committee, and then the House sent 102 bills over. We've already handled, I believe, some of the Del.Cox's bills in there. We have a lot of very serious issues still pending before us that are pitting, battles between health professions, issues within our school, including some education accountability stuff and some parental choice stuff. So we've still got some serious stuff to deal with tomorrow. I've got 56 bills on the docket for tomorrow.
56.
And I can tell you I've never dealt with that many bills in one setting. We have dealt with 46 in one setting, but only with the help of a couple of block motions. So we may have to have another meeting tomorrow afternoon to get it done. We're coming up against the deadline.
What do you attribute the increase in bills to?
It must be the fact that it's an election year. I just have this feeling. I don't know what else to attribute it to, but that. I'm kind of surprised at the load, to be very honest with you. Now, someone told me that there was a former majority leader in the Senate that used to say, you don't have to report them all, and that's true. We killed the first 37 of the first 93 that we heard, so we know that. But I think some folks, we do think you need to hear them all, though. We don't want to not hear them. So.
Yeah. Riley, what about your committee, County, Cities, and Towns? I know you deal with a lot of charters and things of that nature, but I know you've had a pretty heavy workload as well.
We did, but Woody, usually we get anywhere from 90 to 120 bills. This year we only had about 70, 75. In fact, my committee, we will finish up Friday, and we only have 2 bills now that are signed. They'll come up this afternoon in the subcommittee. But we really very, very fortunate. We rolled this year. We did good, and the bills that were not good we took care of, and the bills that were good we passed them and took them on to the House. Very good.
Well, how's your district doing, especially in terms of economic activity, unemployment?
We're doing real good. Chesterfield County is very fortunate. They've got a big paper plant that's in the making now, but it's going to take them probably a couple years, a year and a half, to get everything together. But they're on target, and they're going to be employing probably about 2,000 people, Woody, and that's going to be very, very good. We have had expansions in Chesterfield and in my district, the Bermuda district. Very, very good, and Chesterfield is a very, very fine ran county, and the Board of Supervisors and the county manager and also the county administrator, and school board, everybody works together and they do a real good job.
Great. And Kirk, how are things going for you? You've had a busy session as the majority leader.
We're all busy. It's interesting. The plant that Riley mentioned, I have the bill on. It's the Shandong Trailun Paper Company. It's a really unique Chinese paper company that is very prominent in China. They have this very environmentally friendly process where they basically take straw, make it into sort of wood pulp, and they make corrugated cardboard, et cetera. But that's going to be, as he said, a $2 billion investment. And so we're very excited about that. But I've been busy. One of the things we do in the House, which I love, we could do even better, we have a 15-bill limit in the short session. So that's cut down a little bit. When I originally put that in, it was a 10-bill limit. I couldn't get that through. So maybe after this year, with Steve and Riley's testimony, I can get it down to 10. Majority Leader, a lot of stuff going on, try to, obviously control the flow of the bills on the floor and argue for them. But I think Riley and I probably are the busiest right now with the budget. That's become the dominating feature because the House has passed their budget, the Senate's passed their budget, so now it's time to negotiate the differences.
So as a budget conferee, you are part of a small group that's at the table, so to speak, and some people say it's much better to be at the table because you might become part of the menu.
That's a good way to put it. But we try priorities going into budget conference. We have 3 or 4 really important ones. Very little debt, because obviously that's something we're really trying to bring down. So we basically, in the House budget, have really paid for almost all of our capital projects with cash. So we've eliminated about $43 million worth of debt from the governor's budget. Fees are very big. The governor had about $10 million worth of fees in his budget. Everything's from weights and measures to restaurant inspection fees. We've eliminated a lot of those. And rainy day fund. Obviously, we have a prepayment that's going to be due in 2017, so we're trying to set some money aside for that. But there's some good things in there. I mean, our very hardworking teachers, I did it for 30 years, 1.5% pay raise, and that's a local match because they're local employees. Got good pay raises for state employees, but I'm particularly proud of the state police. They have really struggled. We've got 3 things for them: a pay raise, a compression issue where a lot of times as you move up in the state police, as you know very well, the pay is really not equitable at all. So we've addressed that. And then overtime pay is a big issue for state police. So we have about $4 million in for overtime pay. So that's something I think it's a nice balance of what we've done.
Steve, you and I were talking earlier about some budget-related matters, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how you think the budget process has gone.
Well, I appreciate that, and I haven't been able to dig in as deeply with the House budget. I suspect that they've done a great job, but I am especially proud of how well our Senate Finance Committee has done as well. Some of us went to them and said, we're not going to be able to support a budget that has any of these fees, tax and fees increases that the governor has proposed. We're going to need to take care of our state police officers, our law enforcement. We're going to need to take care of increased courtroom security issues, our teachers, and all of them. And we're also going to need to take care of the 2 new Veterans Care Centers without issuing debt for all that. Write checks for as much as we possibly can for it. And they took us up on all that and fashioned a budget that did that. And so we're very, very proud of them in that regard. Yeah, I have probably, over the years, voted a little bit on the more against the budgets because they weren't fashioned how I would want to see them done. So I think probably the House and the Senate budgets are probably close enough that we could get this done fairly soon, and might, I would hope, even be able to get out of here early because despite the bill traffic that we've got.
Well, you've got about 200,000 constituents, I believe.
Yeah.
To what extent have they
well
been,
over that, but,
a little bit over that, but
yeah.
to what extent have they been impacted by what goes on in Washington, for example, in terms of budget cuts that have heavily burdened the Defense Department and sequestration?
Well, Kirk and I both, and Raleigh, all have areas that are affected by that a great deal. Yes, it affects it negatively. In anything that the Washington does that hampers or discourages investors from making an investment in business also causes us harm. If folks start feeling great about the economy such that they would invest dollars, that makes a difference. So they affect us that way. But I do want to say, as to the economic well-being of our jurisdictions, in Chesterfield County, housing is up. As a percentage, very strong, but that doesn't mean that it's anywhere close to what it was. Our commercial development is going to follow a little bit more slowly and come along a little bit more slowly in the same way that it fell more slowly than the housing drop did. It will recover more slowly. The cost of fuel issue has been very helpful to us. These folks, they've already spoken to the issue of trailing and our job creation. So let me tell you, with regards to trailing, they spoke of the 2,000 employees. But what it's going to do for our agricultural interest in a mill in Chesterfield and Prince George and Dinwiddie, Kirk called it straw, and so they call it straw as well. But it's not straw in the normal sense that we think of it, because corn stalks is in fact technically a straw. And so our folks are going to be able to change the way in which they grow corn. Yes, they can. The ears of corn may wind up being a side product, which they can actually still make money off of. But now the way in which they're growing is more dense, so that they can produce more straw in the form of stalks that would then be purchased by this plant. So in so many ways, that plant is going to have a very positive impact on our economy.
Great. Go ahead.
Well, just like you mentioned, the sequestration, I hope I can say the word properly, Fort Lee is very much involved with this, and we're hoping that Fort Lee is going to actually come out of this pretty good, but we don't know that because of everyone taking a hit. But we're hoping that they'll be able to consolidate like they did in the last cuts that they did to the military. And we're hoping that Fort Lee will end up with consolidation of a lot of things that are. Fort Lee has the land, they have the buildings, they have everything there. And Randy Forbes, Congressman Forbes, has done an excellent job in Washington for getting money to expand Fort Lee, and that's in all of our districts. And so we're looking forward to that too.
And of course, as you well know, because you've been around here long enough, persistence is key, and noise matters. Now, you've got a bill that you've caught a lot of noise on recently, and that has to do with bicycles. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Woody, my little bill, all it said was, in fact, we had it narrowed down to offer the amendment to pertain to Route 5, where we have spent just hundreds of thousands and really millions of dollars putting these bike trails in, and they're under construction now, from here to 295 and from 295 all the way down to, in other words, you can go to Jamestown, but it's right there near at Williamsburg. And the bicyclists, they are riding in the road on Route 5 where the speed limit is 55 miles an hour. But anyway, I put the bill in, narrowed it down to where it said if it's a bike lane there, that they are to use the bike lane unless it's a special event or something like that. Well, it went down in flames because the bicyclists opposed the bill, and they had 3 lobbyists here opposing the bill, and said that with these new bikes with the small tires that they can ride 20 to 30 miles an hour, and these bikes cost $8,000 to $10,000, and if they're on this trail and they hit a stick or something, and one person even told me that when there's a lot of snow on the ground, that the bicycle trails a lot of times are not feasible to ride on. But, you know, I don't know many bicycle riders that ride in the snow, but anyway, that's beside the point. But it went down in flames. It didn't go anywhere. They killed the building subcommittee.
Kirk, talk to us a little bit about the importance of diversifying the economy, because I know that's something that you've been working on within the context of the budget. How do we grow the economy, especially in terms of private enterprise?
It's a very good point. You'll see a lot of innovation in the budget. For example, especially with our higher ed institutions, we try to seed them a little bit with some of those types of things, whether it be up at George Mason, where we're trying to basically have them do more online platforms. We've got some money in for an business innovation hub there. Here at VCU, we have a really interesting project. A lot of people are familiar with CCAM. That's sort of the Advanced Manufacturing Consortium down in Prince George, Rolls-Royce, et cetera. But there's also CCALS, which does advanced logistics. And we have a really interesting budget amendment where CCALS would do a lot of work for the Port of Virginia, because obviously traffic in and out of there is crucial, et cetera. So they'll do a lot of simulation studies to basically show them how to make that more efficient. It's a neat consortium of businesses and colleges. So that's an interesting, different way to do it. Cybersecurity is extremely big, so trying to, I think, incentivize that to some degree. But whether it be Virginia Tech or UVA, because I do a lot in the higher ed space, we're really trying to get them to be sort of innovative in some of those techniques. So we're doing a lot in that area.
So what are we doing in terms of ameliorating the cost, especially the rising cost of tuition at our institutions of higher learning?
Yeah, student debt is a huge issue. I think it's around $1 billion for students in Virginia, $1 trillion across the United States. And I think we need to look at it holistically, but we have a model that's been somewhat very successful. We have very highly ranked colleges and universities, but the model is enrollment keeps going up, more and more amenities, college really nice. I'm not sure that model is sustainable for everyone in the next 15 or 20 years. And so one of the issues I've taken on this year is student fees, especially non-academic fees. And if we look at athletics, and I'm a huge sports guy, I've coached basketball and baseball, but if we look, 3% of students play a NCAA intercollegiate sport. And JLARC did a study of that and said, a lot of students would like probably for student fees to go down. They're probably a little bit more interested in club sports, intramurals, other things, not just intercollegiate sports. There are only 7 schools across the nation that make money on sports. So my bill, which is fairly complex, would basically say, let's find out what your peer institutions basically do in student fees. So if you're UVA, we'll rank you against those type schools. If you're a Longwood, which is a 1A school, we'll rank you against those. Let's get an average of what they spend on student fees, and you have to hit that benchmark. What we find out, some of our schools fall below the benchmark, some are way above the benchmark. And so basically they've got 5 years to get to that lower student fee ratio. I tried to make the bill where everyone could meet it. And so I worked with ODU and JMU. Some of the ones would have to stretch a little bit, but I think they're all fairly pleased with it now. Passed the House. It will pass the Senate committee today with some amendments that I'm not thrilled with, so we'll work on those. But I'm hoping to bend the cost curve and just get people to think differently. If you want to move up a division, it requires General Assembly approval. So let's see your financials. Why do you think that will work for you? Everyone thinks they're going to be Ohio State. Everyone's going to the national championship. Everyone's going to get the big bowl money, and the numbers show that just can't feasibly happen.
So, Steve, this matter is crossing your desk, so to speak, as well as another bill which would initiate a flat fee concept, if you will. Talk to us about both of those.
Well, the bill that he's speaking of now is now before Finance. It's going to be passed tonight. And the flat fee, I will tell you that I opposed it because it mandates to the colleges and universities that they do this. In insurance terms, it's kind of like the 5-year term policy, where you're raising the cost on the front end and then lowering it on the back end, and you're averaging it. That's pretty much what you're doing. It does provide stability to a home to know that it's X amount that you're going to have to pay for this period of time, but you don't actually know exactly what the inflation rates are going to be in the out years, so you don't know for certain if you're saving money or not. I believe that it's best to leave that to the institutions rather than we mandate to the institutions that they must all do it. I know William and Mary has done it, and it seems to be working well there. But that's what it amounts to. It's basically the concept of a flat term policy for a 4-year period. I said 5 years a moment ago because in the insurance world it's the 5-year thing, but that's really what that amounts to.
Now, violence on campuses has been a big issue, and there's been a move to fashion some legislation regarding that. Talk to us about it.
Well, I want to begin by saying that we know that the Rolling Stone article was largely not. The matter addressed in it was not correct. There's a lot of false information there, but that doesn't mean that there aren't problems on our college campuses. So I know that just out of the Senate, I had roughly 10 to 11 bills introduced that we had to consider. Had to bring them down to basically 3 different bills. One dealing with the reporting requirements that would exist, which we decided that you need to report that if you know about that to the police. Then the issue of campus policy with regards to how it's handled, and then with regards to what's on your transcript or not. So that's how the 3 bills came down. I think the House wound up only sending us one on the subject, and we're going to be taking that up tomorrow morning in our 7:45 a.m. meeting. I believe that the House modified our reporting requirements a bit on the bill, And I expect that the two bills will have to go to committee of conference where we're going to work it out. Now, I will tell you that from the institutions themselves and from the student bodies, I'm hearing please do not have an absolute mandatory report to the police without accommodation for the Title IX issues and the reporting through there. Because if you do, the reporting of the violent instances are going to go down. People are going to be unwilling to step forward. So I think that we do need to give some deference to the Title IX and then the privacy, and then having police brought in, but not necessarily making it a police file until you're more certain as to cooperation from the.
Now those Title IX requirements are federal regulations.
Yes, which some would argue is going to override anyway. So I think we definitely do need to take them into account when we. But we can easily have a situation here where everybody's trying to out-tough each other. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think among some personalities in the legislature here, we've got some of that going on. So I appreciate the responsible way in which the House looked at it as well. So I think we're going to come to some accommodation here.
Riley, are you hearing much from constituents about this issue?
Some, but not a lot. What I'm hearing mostly now, of course, all three of us are up for re-election this year, and of course in the Senate they only run every 4 years. Kurt and myself, we run every 2 years. And with this being an election year, we don't know what to expect as far as opposition and things like that. But from what I understand, the lady that's going to run against me and a Democrat has already announced, and she's on the internet and the whole thing. But you know, it's a people's seat, Woody, and it's up to them to decide who they want to represent them. And I enjoy representing the people, and I try to do the things that the people want me to do, and I enjoy it. What
about your local school districts? What are you hearing in terms of standards of learning, for example, and issues like that?
Well, let me tell you what, and Kurt's very versed on this. By the way, I'd like to say that they do a great job in the General Assembly, but you know, we have improved that this year somewhat, and I do hear that from time to time, but I hear more teachers. I hear more from the teachers than the constituents, because a lot of the constituents are not aware of all the things that are going on, where the school teachers themselves are. And but I think that we in the General Assembly try to tweak things. We try to take the things that are not exactly where they should be and try to do that, and Kurt has done an excellent job with that, with education.
So I know we're doing a little bit more in terms of standards of learning. I understand that we may have a Tim Tebow bill this year finally. And of course there are other educational issues, sure. K through 12. Talk to us about those.
We've tried to have a reform package the last few years in the House. Last year we eliminated 5 SOL tests in the elementary and middle school. We want to be careful there, though, because the SOL tests have served us well. You need benchmarks. You particularly need to know, how schools are performing. So we're trying to balance that out. I mean, 34 tests were too many. We got up to too many. But I don't want to go back to the days where there was no accountability, because I think that was just as problematic. We're trying to do small things like expedited retakes, and that is when, obviously, someone who just barely fails can quickly take a retake. We basically made those more available in this budget. We have the money for that. Looking at maybe interdisciplinary tests. And so instead of just being a history test, maybe a combined English and history test. A lot of the same skills, do a lot of writing in history and government. So that's an interesting tweak. But some other things like I taught advanced placement for years, and I taught all levels of government. One of the problems is different colleges take different scores on advanced placement, so it's really hard to tell your kid, JMU does this, UVA does this. We're trying to standardize that through SHEV, where you would sort of know if you're the student, this is what I get for doing an AP test. So there's some really, I think, some of them you would think were small, but I think they're important. I know Steve just had the Tim Tebow bill on the Senate floor, so he can speak to the amendments better, but that's a bill that's obviously been up for years. It will allow homeschool students, obviously, to compete in Virginia high school league sports. I've always supported it for this reason is, number one, I do think it's, those parents pay taxes. I think number two, it's not going to be the burden a lot of people think it's going to be. Trying out for teams is very competitive. You know, the best kids should make the teams. You still have to go by a lot of the disciplinary standards, all the rules the various coaches set down. There are a lot of things in the bill that you have to do, so it's not that you are treated that differently. And so I've always liked the concept, so I'm glad to finally see it being promoted. I'm a little bit unusual in that I'm a very, not unusual, but I think public schools do a good job, and I'm a school choice guy too. They are not mutually exclusive. And I think on the school choice issue, why you want to keep parents in schools or kids in schools they don't want to be in is never registered with me, never understood that concept. But I think most of our public schools are great. Our teachers do a good job. We have a 1.5% pay raise for teachers in there. They've struggled the last few years. I mean, it's a tough job. You're asking them to do more and more. So I think it's a nice balance, what we've done in the budget.
Steve, you can talk a little bit more about the Tim Tebow situation, but go ahead.
The way the bill boils down now, it's just that we're saying that localities, local school boards, you can choose to participate. And there's 7 that have stepped forward saying we want to. The other part of it is that the Virginia High School League can't deny them the opportunity to compete with the other schools just because they chose to do it. And Kirk's right, you've got to adhere to all the policies and the things that the coach and the schools would set out. You've got to do that. If I can, there are 2 things. Economically, my big concern, and I've introduced a bill the last 2 years, and it's very important to me, and I think it is important in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're doing a lot to build our port down there, but yet a lot of our manufacturing jobs are going across the border to North Carolina because North Carolina is ratcheting down their corporate income tax. It's my understanding that the counties on the border on the North Carolina side, their growth rate in employment is tripling the average of the rest of the state because of what we're doing at our port. We're spending our money there, and they're getting those manufacturing jobs.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then I just want to say this last week, we were able to have a teletown homing, and I understand you had one last night. I was just shocked at the number of people that came online. Let's say 4,893 citizens on that line, with upwards towards, well over 1,000 that stayed on most of the time. And even after giving them several minutes notice that I was signing off and hanging up, when I hung up, there were still 250 people on the phone. That shows real interest, and people are welcome to give me a call at any time they want, or reach out to Steve at SenatorSteveMartin.com, which I appreciate.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for being here, Senator Steve Martin, Chair of the Senate Education and Health Committee. Riley Ingram, Chair of Cities, Counties, and Towns, and Majority Leader Kirk Cox. Good to see you all.
Thanks, Woody.
Thanks for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.